We'll do it live.
Okay. No.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Fucking thing sucks.
Hello. Welcome to Open Wide for Some Soccer. My name is Seth Bertelny. With me this evening for our now monthly show, Pablo Maurer, Thomas Floyd.
I was telling Seth that I noticed that the last show we did was exactly 1 month ago today, and the one before that was almost exactly 1 month before that.
We're very consistent.
This is a monthly podcast now.
Well, actually, is that an improvement? At least there's a rhythm to it? Yeah?
I don't know, man. I feel the same way about this podcast that I do about, like, skiing. You know, like, I'm okay at it, but I never do it enough to get good at it. And I always tell myself I'm going to do it more. I don't know.
It's All-Star Week. We had to come back for another episode, right? I mean, Thomas will have you guys with his he'll give you his in-depth breakdown of the All-Star game tactically formations.
I'm really interested to see how the matchup in central midfield goes with Jack Wilshere trying to track Giovanni Dos Santos in that playmaking role. There are all sorts of tactical implications to this game that'll be really fascinating to go through as I think we're doing, a 4-hour episode today to fully cover all of that?
Yeah, well, yesterday's news that MLS added Kellen Acosta and Yeli Van Dam to the roster, added at least 30 to 45 minutes to our episode.
Oh, yeah. I have some issues with Kellen Acosta getting in over Osvaldo Alonso. Let's talk about that for the next 30 minutes or so. It's a travesty. Osvaldo Alonso has been the best D-mid in MLS this season. As bad as the Sounders have been, he deserves to be there. This is an outrage.
So we'll be taking your calls if anybody is so inclined to call the Open Wide for Some Soccer bat phone. That is 708-LT-OWFSS. We haven't gotten any messages in the last month, which was a little disappointing.
Can I tell you guys a story about something that happened to me today at work? I just want to share this. There's a Chick-fil-A next to my work, and I was there for lunch today. And I recently got this tattoo. If you see this, it's just like it's like a house cat. And I pulled up the drive-through window, and there was probably a 16-year-old teenager. As a young man, right? And he's like, "Here's your food," and he goes, just stares at me very, very intensely, and just goes, "Oh my God, I love your tattoo. I love cats." Just stares at me. He stared at me, and I was just like, "Okay, thank you," and just drove away.
And then you realize he was looking at a different tattoo, and he just was saying he loved tattoo, and then in an unrelated topic, also loves cats.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyways, sorry, that's all I got.
Cool. Well, let's get into our opening topic, which I believe we're still a DC United focused show around here.
Unfortunately.
Is that
more or less?
I'll have to admit it's not the most interesting team in the world to cover, but we're still doing it on a monthly basis.
They've never been very interesting to watch.
No, but they're coming off a pretty rough road trip, and they have a homestand coming up. 4 out of 5 games at home, and it's there's still a couple months left in the season, but I think we're getting to the point where they're going to have to start to get some points during this upcoming homestand if they really want to challenge for a playoff spot.
Right, they're 4 points out right now of a playoff spot, and we all know, I guess the only thing that matters in MLS is the last 4 to 5 weeks of the season. But this is because they have these 4 home games coming up against relatively weak opponents. I think they really need to.
Well, relatively
United,
weak in that they are Eastern Conference teams.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Montreal's got talent. Philly's got talent. Red Bulls, inconsistent, but good on their day.
Chicago is the one game.
Chicago is the not so great.
You got to get 3 points. The only team in MLS that has a worse goal scoring record than DC United, Chicago.
Oh man, the Fire what's their streak now with road games?
I
They
believe-
haven't won on the road in over 2 years.
I think it's 35 now. 35
Good Lord.
consecutive away
What?
games without a win. That's
Yeah.
an MLS all-time record.
They haven't won an away game since I think like Peter Novak scored the winner for them in like 1997.
Wow. Early phone call here. Let's see. Open wide for some soccer. How can we help you?
Hi, this is Tristan in Seattle, and I was looking for some advice on how to enjoy a truly miserable season. Is that's a requirement, or is it just heavily advised?
So first of all, let me just get your thoughts on the. We'll touch on this a little more later, but what's your feeling on the Siggy Schmidt? I want to say firing, but I'll do him a favor and just say they mutually parted ways. You know.
Yeah, right. It's probably about time. I'm super supportive of what Ziggy did while he was here, but with the slumps that we've had in the past and with how the season went, sometimes even with, capable people, you need to change things up and get a new challenge in there to drive them on. I'm sure he'll be successful wherever he goes. But it's about time. I'm sad to see him go that way. I would have rather it be under better circumstances.
You could make an argument, I think, that he probably could have or should have been gone as long as a year and a half ago.
It's been a few times over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure most Sounders fans have gobbled up every available story on this, but obviously there's a lot of info coming out that he'd sort of had no relationship with Clint Dempsey at this point, and players were walking out of practice, and at some point it just becomes a thing where it's beyond repair. Yeah.
Yeah, just clearly the ship wasn't going right, and it's just looked so listless lately. There was no plan for when the best players weren't performing, so I'm excited to see what happens from here on out.
Do we have any advice for him on that was called in 2013?
Well, I mean, you signed Nicholas Lodero today, a multi-year deal, and he's right in the prime of his career at age 27. So you could enjoy whatever time you have left of the Lodero-Dempsey partnership.
Do you think Lodero was like got off the plane yesterday and was just like, wait, what?
Probably. What did I sign up for?
I mean, I think you're in a bit of a different situation because we got to really thoroughly enjoy the Schadenfreude of like a team that was really bad and just didn't even care and like was never going to try and get better. I don't know what to tell you. I have a feeling that the Sounders are not going to be in second to last place for very long. Certainly not next year. So
yeah, I hope not. Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah, cheers, man.
Cheers.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later. But
speaking of bad soccer teams, back to DC United.
Yeah, I've never seen DC United put in a performance quite like the Sounders did against
that was
Sporting Kansas City.
Maybe the worst I've ever seen a team play.
Is a combination of apathy in regard to fighting for their coach, it seemed like, and also I don't think it helped that it was also like 105 degrees at that game, and you combine those two things and you just had a listless team that looked like it had no desire to be on the field.
Yeah, I've never seen a team so actively try to get their coach fired. I mean,
you could almost just like hear Clint Dempsey's internal narrative of just like, man, I don't even care anymore. I mean, I'm trying to tell you, I don't want to be here.
I don't know if you guys remember the end of the Jim Zorn era for the Washington Redskins.
No.
That was
we don't use
exactly.
that. By the way, we don't use
the
that
Washington football team.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the only other time I can remember in professional sports a team just ignoring, like trying to get their coach fired.
Any other racist things you want to say, Thomas, while you're at it? Get them right off your chest.
Well, I have a lot.
Yeah. Jesus Christ. I think we can all agree much of DC United's problem. I mean, it's a multi-pronged kind of thing, but their back line has been pretty atrocious in recent weeks.
Yeah, I think they're in a tough situation because Bobby Boswell has not been playing the best soccer of his career. He looked a bit sluggish in that draw with Real Salt Lake, really struggled with the pace of players like Burrito Martinez and João Plata. Got
benched for a game.
Got
DC
benched.
Captain benched for a game.
Which I think is the first time that's happened to him in probably like a decade.
Let me ask you guys your reaction to when Boswell was benched Olsen going with Opare instead of Jalen Robinson? Because I can see
Jalen
I can see
Robinson-
both sides of that argument.
I just think Jalen Robinson was like lights out in the one game he played.
So do I. And the thing is, maybe it was an aberration and people are getting overexcited about a still raw player, but give him a chance so we can find out.
And then, of course, Opare, as if to try to prove to Ben Olsen that he made the wrong decision, gave up a penalty and got sent off.
Nearly killed Chris Pontius.
Yeah.
I rewatched that tackle the next day, and just it was one of those ones where what is he even thinking?
On a
Yeah,
yellow.
Yeah. He's not, the answer going forward there. And the fact that they gave him the audition instead of Robinson, I can see short term that you could argue that Opare had earned a chance to show what he can do, and that if they want to look at someone other than Boswell, that he's the guy who's paid his dues and is next in line. But he got his audition. It didn't go well. Things weren't exactly stellar when they played Toronto this weekend either. So I think, I would be very interested to see a Birnbaum-Robinson partnership.
And that should last about 2 to 3 weeks until Birnbaum transfers abroad.
Yeah, I mean, everything I'm hearing about that situation, we haven't really talked about this, I guess, since there was there were some pretty intense transfer rumors about Birnbaum going to Israel. Everything I've heard in the past 2 weeks has been about Steve really, really wanting to go. The team not wanting to take less than a couple $1 million for a U.S. national team center back, but is a thing where I certainly would not expect him to be around these parts much longer.
Yeah, and we can get into this a little bit more when we talk about the Fabian Castillo transfer, but I mean, it seems like teams in Europe are still really undervaluing MLS players. When you talk about a 25-year-old U.S. national team player and you're bidding less than $1 million for him, it seems crazy. Someone who has really started to make a case for himself to get regular playing time with the national team. Okay, he's not quite there yet. He doesn't have a ton of caps, but at his age, with his ability level, I mean, under $1 million seems crazy.
And his value to DC United, I think you can't really argue he's their best, most valuable player aside from Bill Hamid at this point. And for them to sacrifice him let's look at it very practically. In MLS, you sell him for $800,000. He's not a homegrown, so MLS gets a third of the transfer fee. So now DC's getting $550,000. Is he worth $550,000? Of course, think, that and much more.
Especially when DC probably have a pretty large reserve at this point of any number of fake funny money devices to sign players. I don't think they're sweating that. I think the real risk here, though, is that his contract is up at the end of next year, and they'll have to work a new deal out with him, or he just walks for free. I think that's a genuine risk, and we've seen any number of players in MLS who have sort of been on the periphery or even in the U.S. national team, and then just have sort of faded from view. Who's to say that Steve doesn't have the kind of year next year that he did last year, and his stock goes way down, and you're not getting an $800,000 for
And you know what else is interesting? Look at the message that Jurgen Klinsmann sent by taking a player like Perry Kitchen, who was just very much on the fringes of the national team picture for years playing for DC United, and he makes at best lateral move, probably a backward move to a mediocre Scottish team, and suddenly he's there in the first 23. He's on the Copa America roster. Klinsmann's perception
got 45
of
seconds of playing time.
he actually got 0.
Incidentally, did you guys see who Hearts, aka Jam Tarts, was knocked out of the Europa League by recently?
No.
I'm gonna look this up, but I want to say it was a team from Moldova or even a smaller country. I mean, it was embarrassing.
I mean, it's like Jurgen says, you have to test yourself at the highest level against teams from Moldova, and
I'm gonna look this up now. Talk amongst yourselves.
But yeah, it's if I'm Steve Birnbaum, I see my former DC United teammate, his roommate at the Copa America, see his stock rise just from making a move to a lower level European team. And I think, all right, that's what this national team coach values. That's what perhaps is a springboard to a bigger European team down the line. And that's what I need to do to really take my career to the next level and put myself in position to play in the World Cup.
Yeah, I do think that what we were talking about also has to factor into DC United's thinking, which is their center back depth, even right now, is not ideal. So to sell him now, they don't look like a playoff team, but in the East, anything goes. But to sell him now would almost be admitting defeat in their season.
I think to add one more thing as far as understanding where a player like Birnbaum's coming from when he says, I would go to Israel and an $800,000 fee, which obviously is irrelevant to him, but is completely fine. A lot of guys don't want to play for DC United. I mean, they come to RFK Stadium every single day. This is not just me ragging on the team. It's a different thing. I think if Steve plays for the Red Bulls or teams with nice facilities and teams that spend money on players and teams that are ambitious. I don't think it's the hardest thing in the world to say I'm going to go from this sort of middling club in MLS to Scotland or to Israel. You make 3 times as much money there.
Let me just interject real quick. The team that Hearts was knocked out of the Europa League by is Birkirkara FC from the Maltese Premier League.
Oh, the MPL, dude. I bet even they have pro rel.
They finished 3rd in the MPL last year, of course, because the first place team made it to the Champions League.
Anyways, moving on to, let's just touch on this real quick on their other massive problem, which is that they're not scoring any goals at all. What are they going to do about that? I guess we can tie Fabi into this too, because they just unloaded one of their more prolific goal scorers in the past few years.
Yeah, it's been an interesting summer for DC United, and I'm actually writing a story about that this week. How it seems like every summer during the DC United or during the Ben Olsen era as head coach at DC United, they shake up their attack. It goes back to trading for D-Row in 2011, trading Danny Cruz for Leonard Pajoy in 2012, acquiring Luis Silva and Connor Doyle and Colin Martin in 2013, and adding Alvaro Saborio for Luis Silva in 2015. And are we getting some technical difficulty? Okay, we're back.
We're back.
But yeah, so every summer, DC United just shakes up their attack, and it's almost like a tradition. I wonder what that says about the team that they constantly need a jolt in the attack to kind of get things going. But then on the plus side, a lot of these moves have worked. Dwayne De Rosario was the MLS MVP after a midseason acquisition.
Well, they work in the short term, right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, not in the long term, but yeah. I mean, I think, for example, that we haven't been on the air since the Sam trade, for example. I think that's a good pickup, assuming he has the kind of year he had 2 years ago and not the sort of year that he's having now. It's just it's another classic case, of Ben taking a chance on a cast-off from another team. Those don't always work out, so I'm really not sure what to expect in the run-out,
Yeah, it's... Lloyd...
I just want to maintain quickly, by the way, my firm anti-Alvaro Saborio stance, which I've had since he arrived, and I just think he's,
Are you team Al-Haji or team Patrick?
Oh, I'm team Mullins for sure. I mean, I was impressed with him last year. Obviously I've taken like kind of a liking to NYCFC, so I watched a lot of their games, and he's a guy that a lot of DC fans probably wanted them to draft right out of Maryland. So I think he's a good fit. Obviously, completely different kind of player than Saborio, but
he seems to have always been productive when he's gotten playing time in MLS, and he just hasn't been in a situation where he has gotten consistent playing time. He was in New England, and they had a lot of good strikers, Agudelo, Charlie Davies, and then, of course, he went to NYCFC, where David Villa is the focal point of that team. So if there ever was a situation where he really has a chance to thrive and earn minutes in MLS, I mean, this is it. If he can't get minutes in DC and can't produce, then we'll know that he just wasn't really up to that level.
And
but
he's got a coach at Olsen who's notorious for sort of playing the hot hand. I mean, all it's going to take is Mullins getting a look and putting in a couple goals. And
he also has, from what I've heard, a front office that believes in his ability. That dating all the way back to that draft when they ultimately took Birnbaum with the number 2 pick after trading out of number 1, but there was serious consideration given to drafting Mullins number 1 overall, that they had done their due diligence scouting him at Maryland around the corner, and that Casper was a big fan, and that they really were the only team that valued Mullins that highly, as we saw, because he ended up dropping all the way to 11 or so in that draft after being an option to go number 1. So I think it's a good landing spot for him. That's a front office that believes in him, and he seems to be a player who fits the system and could really thrive if he just gets consistent minutes.
I remember, like yesterday, the rage of Rimmer Rudy repeatedly cursing the team for not drafting, I quote, Patrick Mulligans.
Rudy's still out there, by the way. He replies to a few of my tweets every now and again.
Really? Rudy, if you're out there, give us a call, 708-LT.
I must have muted him.
Yeah. We've been asking Rudy to call our show for about 2 years now, and it hasn't happened.
I think he's called a couple times.
Just disguised himself.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyways.
Are you implying that Rudy is actually Dan Dickinson's alter ego?
I don't think about that.
I mean, certainly Mullins is going to be a better fit for this new system where they're only playing one striker than Fabian Espindola was, and that's part of the reason why they have shipped Fabi out of town. And it was an interesting couple of years with Fabi, right? I mean, he had some moments of real brilliance where he was one of the top attacking players in the league. Obviously, a couple of years ago, he was a MVP candidate, would have been if he hadn't gotten hurt. But also, you had moments where he really would drift out of games. There were issues with getting injured. There were issues with pushing linesmen and getting suspended. So it's sort of a mixed bag, but he certainly was productive.
I'm just going to put this out there, and it's only stuff that I've heard, either of you guys. Like, he also had issues with teammates. I mean, earlier this year, there were rumblings that when Charlie Horton missed a couple games of the concussion, it was on Espindola, that he had, it was the two of them had been sort of feuding earlier in the week, and that, Espindola went up for a ball in training, gave him a pretty stiff elbow, and knocked the dude out, and, there have been rumblings over the past year or two that Fabi was oftentimes difficult to deal with in the locker room and also on the field, that I've heard more than one player say that he's just a frustrating player to play with because you literally have no idea where he's going to be at any given time. I mean, it's the same thing that makes him at times a genuine threat. His unpredictability also makes him difficult to play with as a teammate.
He's interesting to me in that he's a tough player because if he's your focal point, that's when he thrives. In a system where he's given the freedom to be the playmaker, can float all over the field and dictate things. But I don't think he's at a level where if he's going to win you an MLS Cup as the focal point of your attack. And then when you load up attack with other players and make him a complementary piece like we saw in New York, like we saw in DC this season after the acquisition of Luciano Acosta, then he doesn't really fit and gel with those types of players. So it's hard to find the right balance with someone like him. Like, do you want him to have that freedom? Do you think he can take you all the way if he has that freedom? Or do you try to fit him in and develop chemistry with other players, which is kind of a tough thing for him to do?
He's also, it's worth saying, too, I think he's one of those guys that thrives on change. And, was great right after coming to RSL, was great right after coming to DC. Wasn't particularly good with the Red Bulls, but like you said, I don't think that they really gave him the best run out, so I don't know, wouldn't be surprised if he sort of lit it up in Mexico for the next 6 months. You know, who knows?
Yeah.
Should we move on to some general MLS stuff?
Yeah, let's
do that.
More than enough DC United.
Yeah, that was a tough 26 minutes, but we made it through. Let's get back to what our caller was talking about, which is the situation in Seattle with Ziggy Schmidt. I think that based on how Seattle's been playing this season, and based on the fact that Ziggy's job has been on the line multiple points over the last 2 or 3 years, that this firing isn't a surprise. I have seen it suggested in some quarters that maybe Seattle waited too long to pull the trigger, not just because they have been playing so poorly, but because they ended up missing out on Jason Kreis by about a week because he was hired by Orlando City last week. Of course, there's the connection with Garth Lagerwey, who's now in the Seattle front office, who was with Kreis in Salt Lake. I mean, I could go either way on that. I'm not sure if that really is a situation where Seattle was going to hire him for sure. What's your guys' take on that?
I'm just waiting for Jason Kreis to, who was it, Bielsa? Just got hired for a day and then quit his new job a month ago.
Lazio. Now they're suing him for like $10 million.
Oh
I would like to see Jason Kreis do that for the sheer entertainment value of the situation. I mean, if Kreis was Seattle's guy, then maybe they should have been a little quicker to pull the trigger. Maybe especially once they saw that there was an opening and that Kreis was negotiating with a team like Orlando. But I'm very interested to see what they do, because it's a job that Schmid took over and it was an unknown quantity, and now everyone knows that the Sounders are a potential MLS powerhouse in terms of the resources they have, the fan base they have, and they could attract a very good coach. I don't know if they go for someone from abroad or if they try to lure a existing MLS coach from another team.
Here's my take on that. I guess, obviously they're under the care of Brian Schmetzer right now, who's been an assistant with the Sounders since 2008. And there's a lot of chatter that he might just get the job permanently. I think Seattle said they're not going to make a decision on that till the end of the year. My attitude is it seems like he's the man for the job. If you're just going to go out and get another MLS coach, I feel like they would just stick with the dude who's been there since 2008. Now, if they're going to go out and get, this will never happen, but like a Roberto Martinez or something like that.
That was the name that people have been throwing around already.
Yeah, but that's just ridiculous. You know what I mean? He obviously has designs on Europe still. Unless they're going to go shower $2 million on him or something.
Who's available? Marcelo Bielsa.
I was just thinking that.
Mentioned that. I do.
Short temper though. I don't know if he has.
I'm curious if the fan base in Seattle would embrace a Schmetzer or maybe an up and coming MLS assistant when they are so clearly demanding and wanting their club to be a super club winning MLS Cup every year. Or will they only accept a big European name a la Martinez?
I just think you have to take a step back and think of what foreign coaches, higher profile coaches have done at MLS, which is not very much. I think
Patrick Vieira is leading the first place team in the Eastern Conference.
Unbelievable, right? Was there a moment in that derby game when either of you thought to yourself, "Oh my God, it's happening again"? They're going to lose. They're going to lose by 7 goals.
I mean, yeah, definitely.
I feel like every other game I watch, Patrick Vieira looks completely out of his element and outclassed and outcoached in every way, and somehow the team's still in first place.
I can't believe he got ejected.
It's
incredible.
And then went after Jesse Marsch big time in his post-game presser. Said he told him to stop crying, and it was good stuff.
Ref made calls for the other team because he's such a crybaby in the week, or something like that.
He did. It was an epic tangent that he went on in that press conference. There was a lot more than just that quote that you mentioned, Thomas, but it was all sort of getting at the same point, which was that Jesse Marsch, who had made some comments earlier in the week that MLS refs were favoring big-name players in the league, specifically the big-name New York City FC players. And
nobody in the history of this league, I tweeted this out last week, gets away with more shit than Didier Drogba. I am not wrong. Like, it's not just the stuff he does on the field. It's like during breaks in play, he'll like, if he goes to discuss something with the referee, he'll just walk up to him and like put his arm around him and like.
Do you think he's like seeing how much leash he's being given, and now he's just like, all right, I just want to like,
100%.
for my own amusement, want to see how far I can push this. Like, how about I try to just tackle the other team's goalkeeper during a game? Huh? Nothing? Okay.
I buy it. Anyways.
Did we want to wrap up the Seattle situation? I think there's a little bit more there based on what we read in Charlie's article. Charlie Boehm had an article last night, if anyone missed it, about a lot of the discontent that was going on in the Seattle locker room. You had veteran players walking out of training. You have Clint Dempsey, who wasn't on speaking terms with Ziggy, counting down the days left in his contract, which seems a little odd to me because he still has a year and a half. And
yeah,
when
that's a while.
And when that deal's over,
potentially a World Cup, and like
Yeah, and when that deal's over, he's 35. I mean, he's no Zlatan. He's not going to play until he's 45. So, I wonder if firing Ziggy helps with this. It seems like it's a good start, but when you have a locker room that appears to be in that much disarray, clearly it's going to take a little bit more than just firing a coach to solve it all.
Yeah, you would think so. It's also a bit of a shame that, Clint Dempsey, as we've talked about on this podcast in the past, is making an increasingly compelling argument for being the best player in U.S. history. And, the guy he's probably up against, Landon Donovan, aside from like a couple years with the Galaxy during the early Beckham era, we never saw much of like Donovan playing for a bad Galaxy team. Whereas Clint Dempsey has now been on the Sounders, and he won an Open Cup, and aside from that, they've never made an MLS Cup. They're having a terrible season this year, and his time in MLS is obviously, there's only so many years he has left, and we're seeing him kind of toiling for a poor team this season, and that's a little bit of a shame.
Yeah, and certainly he wasn't winning any trophies in his time in England. There was that one year that he managed
Almost
to get
won the Europa
Fulham
League.
to the Europa League final, which was pretty incredible. But yeah, clearly his time spent in England was more about trying to fight off relegation than it was about winning trophies.
Right. So, what else do we have on the docket? We have the Fabian Castillo transfer.
Smooth transition.
Thank you.
What's next on the list of topics?
Thomas, just leave the transitions to me and Pablo. Okay.
No one was talking.
Well, you have to let the silence just live for a minute.
Sometimes you just have to. It's like letting the game breathe if you're a commentator.
Right.
Sometimes you just watch the team pass the ball around.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be like, that's why he's here anyway.
Did we say all that we needed to say about the New York Derby? I feel like I have to point out the stat.
I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
Who is a better soccer team, NYCFC or the Red Bulls?
Oh, Red Bulls.
The Red Bulls.
There's no question.
It's just like the mystery of MLS that this can happen. I will say I've never seen a team as bad at dealing with the press as NYCFC is.
I think it was a combination of the press and, in this particular game, the heat.
Are you talking about the media or the?
Both. Both, I guess. Yeah. But I was talking about on the field. I was actually talking to Thomas during that game, and I said that, and then I texted him again because I said, you know what? Actually, watching this game, New York's barely even pressing. They're just terrible in their own end of the field.
Yeah, they. The issue is they have a team where the midfielders can handle that type of situation, but the back line is just not built for that at all. Jefferson Mina cannot distribute out of the back well. Frederick Briand is a disaster waiting to happen.
Jason Hernandez is, no hyperbole here, the worst starting defender in MLS.
The back line.
Name one player who's
the
worse.
back line is just about as bad as it was last year when they were a complete disaster, with the exception of Matarrita, who's been a good signing at left back.
And even he's kind of iffy defensively.
Yeah, right.
There's several players like Matarrita or like Ethan White who have good games and bad games, and then there's players like Mina and Hernandez that just have bad games. over and over again.
Mina, I feel like not enough people were getting on him. He was so incredibly bad in this game. The last goal was he was beaten for a header near midfield, and then the player who beat him for the header, Bradley Wright Phillips, proceeded to run onto the ball, go in on the keeper, and score. And Jefferson Mina just like slowly jogged about 10, 20, 30, 40 yards behind the play. Like if he tracks that play, he easily has enough time to catch up and make the defensive clearance, and he just completely gave up on the play, and they allow a goal because of that. Like this is I don't know, he's a guy who struggled a ton last year after signing midseason and hasn't looked any better in his few games this season, which means they're still stuck with Hernandez and Brian as their best center back pairing, and it's just not a great situation.
Yeah, it is still bizarre to see New York City FC in first place in the Eastern Conference with a -4 goal differential.
Oh man.
I mean, to be maybe, I don't even know if this is to say to be fair to them, but you should point out that they are -8 against the Red Bulls and and +4 against the rest of the league. So maybe it's just something about
the 7-0 didn't help.
Yeah, and something about the Red Bulls that they just have their number, even though they were able to actually win a game against them a few weeks back. But it is pretty bizarre. But you do get the feeling that this team, although they're in first place, I could easily see in a few weeks them being down fighting for a playoff spot.
Yeah. I just want, whatever happens, for those two teams to meet in the playoffs. Whatever permutations need to happen.
I would love for that to happen, and then to watch the Red Bulls lose. I mean, I don't dislike the Red Bulls. I just like narratives, I guess.
You just like Tommy McNamara.
Dude, I mean,
the goal he scored was insane.
And he almost scored another one that was arguably probably better. The guy is also just really fucking good. Like I feel like it's a running joke with him in a way, because obviously I've made him into some kind of god, but he got that way because I saw him at Chivas and was like, this dude can ball, and he has an Irish passport. I tweeted this out the other day. They need the U.S. needs to get him into camp. Like, really, Ireland needs him more than the U.S. do. So. I'm serious. Lock the dude down,
McNamara also, I think he has 4 goals this year, and 3 of them have just been highlight reel, 30-yard strikes.
I mean, they're all the same goal, right? He sort of perfected that 25 to 30-yard upper nine shot.
Any team that gives him space, 25 yards from goal, 5 yards to the right of the middle of the pitch is just stupid.
Yeah, and then he almost did it again. In the second half of that game, he almost scored 2 goals of the week in the same game. So unlucky, went off the underside of the crossbar. Before we move on, I just want to give you one more random NYCFC stat, apropos of nothing. They have 6 away wins this year. There are 11 MLS teams that have either 0 or 1 away wins.
They have the best road record by far in MLS. I mean, it's not,
Yeah. That's just.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. Obviously, their style of play is much more fitted for a wider pitch than the one at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, so maybe their problem is just Yankee Stadium, and unfortunately for them, that's a problem that is going to continue for a long time.
Be there for the next 7 to 8 years.
Yeah.
So
let's move on to
they'll get their stadium sometime during the second Trump presidency.
God.
Wait. I wanna analyze this.
Horrifying thing just came over this table.
You didn't say second Trump term. You said the second Trump
presidency.
presidency.
Oh yeah, talking about Donald Jr.
Exactly. That's what I'm wondering.
Or maybe Ivanka.
Eric.
I mean, we did first female presidents. It'd be incredible if the first female president was Ivanka Trump.
The second Trump dynasty.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I mean, let's be real. He will suspend elections for the foreseeable future once he's elected.
I'm going with 13-year-old Barron Trump in 2020.
I mean, it's
so horrified right now.
It's happened throughout history, right? Where there are leaders that ascend to the throne.
I mean, there's not going to be an election. It's just going to be like a fascist transfer of power.
Right.
Like Donald Trump received 98% of the vote again.
Baron. Baron, what a great name for a young dictator.
Just-
Exactly. Up and coming.
Just straight up, I'm going to name my child Baron. I'm going to name my child Caviar. Like, I named my child Gulfstream. Like, give me a fucking break.
Somehow he knew.
Yeah.
So pivoting from Baron Trump to Fabian Castillo. See, that's how you do it right there.
Nailed it.
Yeah. Fabian Castillo, I think there are a couple aspects of this transfer which are worthy of discussion. Number one, the nature of MLS, how they're off with the rest of the world schedule, again, is coming back to haunt them a little bit, because you have a team that's right in the midst of their playoff run, coming down the home stretch last couple months, and they have to sell one of their best players because the transfer window's open in Europe, and all these teams in Europe are in their preseason trying to build their roster. So, how much does this affect FC Dallas is one thing worth discussing. And the other thing is the reported number we've seen is $4 million.
No, isn't it a lot less than that now? I want to say it was under 2 million, like 1.7 million.
No. I think it's somewhere. I saw it was somewhere between 3 to 4.
You two talk and I'll find it.
Either way, FC Dallas, this is a brutal blow. I wouldn't completely rule them out of the race for certain trophies. I mean, this is MLS. The point I made in one story I wrote is, people forget Sporting KC sold Kai Kamara in September of the year they won MLS Cup. Like, he wasn't, MLS Golden Boot contender Kai Kamara at that point, but he was still an extremely talented, important player. And they sold him at a point where they had no chance of replacing him. They just, cashed in when they had the chance and overcame that blow to their roster anyway. And Dallas has the depth. They can plug in Tesho Akindele. They can move Ryan Hollingshead up the field. They can maybe get some good minutes out Mauro Rosales. They have some options, and also Oscar Pareja is a very savvy coach. And I feel like if there's a good solution on that roster to replace Castillo, he's going to find it.
Yeah, and I saw some people saying that this was a case of FC Dallas selling their best player, which I totally disagree with. I still think this team runs through Mauro Diaz, and if he stays healthy, he's a big enough reason on his own why FC Dallas is still an MLS Cup contender.
If there's any team in MLS that can withstand this kind of blow, it's Dallas. I mean, just incredibly well-run team, full of incredible young players, and defensively incredibly sound.
Yeah, I think LA is the only other one I could think of that has the depth.
$2 million for a 1-year loan, and then if they keep him, it's another $2 million.
Yeah, and that was I believe it's a Brian Strauss report, and yeah, the idea is this is being seen as a transfer.
Yeah,
like it's very unlikely it'll just be a loan and then they send them back. It's just kind of the mechanics of the deal make it look like that.
I mean, interesting to see the Galaxy, for example, reportedly they turned down a $2 million offer from Turkey for Jussi Zardes.
Which is funny because this past offseason, all the reports were they were trying to offload him because they knew they could only keep one of him and Omar Gonzalez, and then it turned out Omar was the only one they were able to get a decent transfer fee for.
I have a theory that maybe the Turkish team slid a contract offer over to Jussi, and he just, with his first touch of the contract, just threw it accidentally out the door. I don't know. They're like, I'm sorry, we can't do this anymore.
There's so much material there, really.
I know. Yeah, God. Anyways,
so the fee, I'm curious. This goes back to the whole Birnbaum thing. How there are teams bidding under $1 million for Birnbaum. You have Castillo, 24-year-old. He has made his international debut for Colombia. He had interest reportedly from bigger countries, England, Germany. Is this transfer fee an indication that MLS players are still undervalued? And if so, why are more European clubs not just raiding MLS teams?
Here's another question to foreign players in MLS. Has it become a thing where American players in MLS fetch less money than, like you said, foreign, with the exception of Josie Altidore, who somehow got $10 million to leave MLS.
He was 18.
And also, to be fair, he then went to the Netherlands and scored 75 goals one season.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it is a thing where I was talking to Charlie about this. Charles Boehm, you'd mentioned earlier. I feel like for European teams, MLS is the equivalent of what Central American leagues are for MLS. MLS sort of raids, as a Costa Rican league or Honduras, El Salvador for these players. They don't really pay very much to get them, and I just think that's probably the attitude that European teams have about Major League Soccer.
Yeah, and I think it's tough because a lot of these MLS players, like we were talking about with Birnbaum, and it definitely seems to be the case with Fabian Castillo, they aren't overly worried about what the transfer fee is that, fetches them. They want to make the move to show progress in their career and experience a different lifestyle and get the bigger salary. And it's kind of up to MLS and the clubs to figure out where they draw the line in terms of trying to accommodate the players' wishes, but also holding out for better deals when it comes to these players' values.
Yeah, and I think deals like these will still help MLS overall because it makes it a better sales pitch to these young players in South America if you can show examples of guys like Castillo where they come MLS, they develop for a couple more years, and then they move on to Europe. And that's
saying MLS should just embrace its image as a stepping stone to a larger league.
Yeah. So let's get into a guy that we mentioned a little bit earlier, Jason Kreis. I'm interested in your guys' take on what sort of a fit he's going to be in Orlando, because I think there are a few issues with the front office that are kind of similar to issues that he faced in New York City, where he clearly wasn't that great of a fit.
Well, I don't know if that's particularly fair. I think the general consensus about his time in New York was that he wasn't really given a lot of say with the roster, and that they didn't stick with him past year. I think you even saw quotes from him that came out today where he finally sort of acknowledged that he feels like he got a raw deal in New York. I think what it comes down to in Orlando is there's all this chatter about Silva being like a sort of a domineering type, and his influence on the roster and decisions is pretty great. And even Kaká, a lot of people say it's basically Kaká's team at this point, so it's sort of like going to be, to me, it's about whether Kreis can sort of overcome those things, and really honestly how much input and control and power the front office wants to give him. Jason Kreis has very little to prove. He's done something with basically a startup in RSL that very few coaches were capable of doing in this league.
Really? Because I think now he has a lot to prove.
I think at this specific point, yeah.
You mean after his firing from NYCFC, of course, yeah.
The fact of the matter is,
my point was more that if he's given the tools he needs to succeed, he will succeed. It's not a situation like Patrick Vieira where you're just not really sure what you're getting. Even you're not even sure what to give him.
Yeah, and I do wonder, and I get that he's a marquee name and he draws a lot more attention to the franchise, and it's more than just on the field results. But I do wonder about the wisdom of making it a team where Kaká makes front office decisions as well, because he's only played 10 games this year. He has not been able to stay healthy, and he's fairly effective when he plays, but I also don't think that he's been lights out in MLS.
I'm very interested to see, kind of to go on a different topic, if Kaká stays healthier once they move to the new stadium and aren't on that crappy turf field. That could be the most important thing for them going forward.
It's still just like shameful that they play on turf in that stadium, and they put so much money into renovating that place, and it's Florida. You can't grow fucking grass in Florida. Where are you going to grow it? You know what I mean? It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
In any case, whatever.
I'm looking forward to what that organization does in the next year, though. I can see the appeal for Kreis, because you go to this team that has, you have a big star, you have, ownership that financially is invested in making ambitious decisions for the club, and then you open up a new stadium as well with that fan base, and that team has a lot of potential. So we were talking about Seattle could have had Kreis. I'm not sure, If necessarily, if I'm Jason Kreis, I prefer the Seattle job over Orlando. They both have a lot of perks.
I just think, again, it comes down to an issue of personalities in the front office. I mean, the thing is, there's a ton of, clearly they're not afraid to spend money. Clearly they have ambition. It's just an issue of when you have those two things, a lot of team owners, presidents, etc., want influence on the team itself. And I think with Kreis, it's a situation where they might have to be kind of hands off and let him do his thing. So we'll just see how that plays out. That's my attitude about it. I don't think it's a slam dunk, at this point, but we'll see what happens.
I think this is a huge job for Kreis because before his time at New York City FC, he was seen as the next big, young, up-and-coming American coach, future national team coach. And I think that if he does well at Orlando City, then you can say that the New York City thing was just an aberration. It was a clash with the front office, and it doesn't really reflect poorly on his coaching ability. But if things don't go well in Orlando City, now you have 2 straight bad coaching stints. All of a sudden, maybe he's not seen as the future national team head coach. He's not seen as the big, young, up-and-coming American head coach that he was before.
Take a quick question from online. Robert, sort of a major sidebar here, but Thomas, maybe you have some input on this. Robert asks, MLS reported TV ratings are up 32%. I haven't seen that study, but I guess let's assume it's true.
It's the ESPN ratings.
Okay. With Liga MX back, do you see that number going down?
I don't think those two would have much of a correlation.
No, I don't think that the fan bases really overlap that much, and I also don't think that the game times overlap that much.
Yeah. Mexico games are later.
I believe the Mexico games are usually on Saturday nights.
Mm-hmm.
They do have Sunday games, but I don't think they show those on national TV very much.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as nobody figures out that Liga MX is wildly entertaining compared to MLS, I think everybody will be fine.
Some people enjoy the defensive discipline of a Axel Schuberg-led backline.
I mean, when you have a Dom Kinnear coach team on national TV, you have to cancel your plans for that night.
Every single time Liga MX might be one of the only leagues in the world where when I probably watch one game a month, and every time I do, I'm like, man, I should watch more of this.
Seriously,
it's always like a 6-4, 8 red card.
Yeah, and usually for me, it's like the playoffs or the final, and even in the final, there's some crazy shit that happens every single time. Yeah, there's a ton of goals. There's a fight on the sidelines. There are 5 red cards.
So Robert, just don't tell anybody about Liga MX, and it'll all be fine.
Yeah.
Anyways,
but I mean, it's a good time to see the TV ratings going up. At the same time, of course, you have to put everything in perspective and say those ratings are still like equivalent to what ESPN gets for like college volleyball. So
like a lot less actually. Let's spend the last 6 minutes of the show talking about the LA Galaxy, who are all of a sudden good again. So
per schedule.
By far the best goal difference.
Who also don't believe in analytics at all, apparently.
Well, it's working for them. Well, here's a stat for you. By far the best goal differential in the league, which is a pretty good indicator of how good the team is. They're plus 15.
Jesus Christ.
The next best team is Colorado, actually, with 9. So you can see that they're just, as usual, rounding into form as the summer rolls on and gets closer to fall.
And there is so much talent on this team. I mean, you look at the attack and
Dos Santos, man, is just like come alive.
Right.
I mean, so much of this is Dos Santos.
Yeah, and also he was injured the last game, but Steven Gerrard, I think we talked about this on the podcast, how he had really struggled for the Galaxy since they moved him to a deeper midfield role because he didn't have the legs to play defensively or show for the ball. And now that he's back higher up the field, he's really thriving, playing him right underneath Robbie Keane, a player he has a lot of chemistry with. And then you have Zardes and Dos Santos on the flanks. And then you've got Leggett and Boateng and McGee and even like still Alan Gordon, all of these options off the bench and also depth for their first Open Cup run in like a decade of going this deep in the tournament. This has the potential to be a Galaxy team that could win a trophy or two going down the stretch this season.
Yeah, I also think that an interesting narrative that has developed over the last month or two of the season, especially with Lampard coming back, is a lot of these older European players who either we thought had been busts during their time in the league or were going to be busts have actually turned out to be pretty good. I mean, when you the Galaxy are a perfect example. You got a couple players in Gerrard and Cole who have been pretty maligned either before they came to the league or right after they were signed. Gerrard, he's had his ups and downs, but Gerrard, Cole, Lampard, they're all now starting.
They're players who you sort of feel stupid when they score. I think Gerrard had a goal about a month and a half ago from 18 to 20 yards out, sort of side volley kind of deal, and I remember thinking oh yeah, it's Steven Gerrard. I mean, when they play well, you feel incredibly stupid for just ragging on them endlessly.
Right. Well, and
with Lampard, sure, he's much better. He's also scored 4 of the worst goals I've ever seen in my entire life. So
yeah, he only scores ugly goals.
Frank
Lampard is like the English Steven Lenhart.
Yeah, you know what? Goals are goals, and if you're not there, you can't score them. You know what I mean? So I'm not hating on him. But the really bad one was the one that Tommy McNamara basically banked in off of it.
No, the really bad one was
the Montreal one.
He got the ball cleared off his shin, and it went in. Regardless, though, I think like Thomas was mentioning with Gerrard, I think it's been just simply a matter of getting him in a position where he didn't have to cover as much ground defensively and was able to do a little bit more in the attack. And, when it comes to Cole, I mean, he's just slotted in and been solid for most of the year.
I knew he'd be good. I didn't hear a lot of people,
Yeah, Cole.
I think the beach vacation comment sort of got him off the wrong.
Well, I mean, more than that, it was just when he signed, he had played about 3 games in a span of 2 years, so you just didn't know what you were getting with him.
Yeah, and to be fair, he's been injured again lately.
Up in Tampa Bay. You guys want to do a segment on that, or I'm just kidding?
Well, let's end on that because Pablo and I were talking about this earlier. Although the video
you gotta see the video.
The video was ridiculous.
For those of you who missed it,
didn't prove anything.
The Tampa Bay Rowdies CEO, I think his last name was Peterson, literally issued an official team statement about how he felt wronged by the refs and included a mixtape of horrible calls.
A 7-minute mixtape.
And all of us are thoroughly here for people who feel that they've been wronged and get incredibly bitter about it.
Yeah.
I enjoy few things as much as I enjoy that dynamic. Go find that and watch it.
Yeah, I mean, 2 things about this. First of all, it proves nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, there
were
some
some bad calls in the mixtape, but others are just sort of you shrug.
Yeah, there were definitely some bad calls, and then there were some calls where it was okay, I can see why the ref didn't call that. Regardless, of course, any team in any league could put together a mixtape of bad calls that have gone against them. But the second thing, as Pablo mentioned, is we're here for that.